"Excuse me, are you familiar with telephone scam?" asked the bank employee, his face stern. It seems he is concerned about fraud, probably because I, an elderly person, want to withdraw a large sum of money. His sense of justice is appreciated, but it has left me a bit troubled. No matter how much I insist that it's not fraud and I need the money for work, he simply won't listen. Finally, he even says, "I'm terribly sorry, but as per the manager's decision, from today onwards, we cannot serve elderly customers." He has made up his mind that elderly people are susceptible to scams. All this while, my wife silently observed his behavior. Her patience finally wore thin, and she began to laugh mischievously. "Hey, you there, could you contact the manager for me? My name is James, and I'm 66 years old. I retired a few years ago and now live in New York City with my wife, Sarah. Since retiring, I've been enjoying my second life. Some days I volunteer to ensure the safety of elementary school children, and other days I help at events in town. I'm also registered with a seniors employment agency and take on simple tasks when I have time. It's been a fulfilling life every day. Well, I'm off then. Take care." My wife, clad in her light pink jacket, headed out. She is still a career woman, working hard every day. She seems busy every day, but despite that, she appears content with her fulfilling life. Our conversations often reveal how much she enjoys her work. Lately, listening to her work stories during dinner or on weekends has become one of my joys. I handle the household chores since she's busy with her job. Cooking, laundry, cleaning tasks I rarely did while working, leading to initial failures, but I've grown accustomed to them now. At first, I truly appreciated the hard work of housewives. By the way, we have a son and a daughter, both of whom have their own families now. Thankfully, they've blessed us with grandchildren, and I've proudly become a grandfather. They live a bit away but often visit us with their children, much to my delight. Having ample time with my adorable grandchildren, who run up to me shouting "Grandpa," is truly healing. Recently, I've found a new hobby. With free time on my hands, I've started a small garden in our backyard. Tending to a home garden like this, you'd be surprised at how many different types of vegetables you can harvest. This sense of accomplishment from harvesting what you've grown yourself is more satisfying than one could imagine. But there's one problem. We often harvest more than we can eat, just the two of us. For now, I'm thinking of making dried vegetables this week. Hopefully, it will turn out well. So, that's how we, having both time and financial freedom, live happily, pursuing our interests. Then, one day, we had an errand at the bank and decided to go together. The nearest branch, just a 10-minute walk from our house, seemed like a nice walk for both of us. However, a few minutes into our walk, we noticed the bank looked somewhat dim. As we got closer, we saw that it was closed with shutters down. It seems they are undergoing renovations. Unfortunately, this meant the bank was closed for the day. "Oh, it's closed," Sarah said, looking up at the notice. "It seems so, but we need to go today. Guess we have no choice but to head to the next town." "That's true, let's do that. How about we dine out too? It's nice to have such days once in a while." Just the two of us, we decided to eat out and visit a bank branch we don't usually go to. The other bank branch we arrived at was extremely crowded, possibly because the nearby branch was closed. All the employees at the counter seemed very busy. "Wow, it's really busy here. Jer, let's get a ticket from the machine." We approached the ticket machine where a young, seemingly new bank employee was standing. "Excuse me." As we approached the ticket machine, a young bank employee, Ryan, asked, "Excuse me, how can I assist you today?" His name tag read Ryan. "I'm here to withdraw some money." "Understood. For withdrawals, you can use the ATM over there, Ryan politely suggested. However, the amount I needed to withdraw exceeded the ATM limit. I explained this to Ryan, saying, "I need a substantial amount, so I would like to use the counter service, please." Upon hearing this, Ryan's expression changed. "Sir, are you sure you need all that money today? I apologize for asking, but are you aware of telephone scam?" Ryan asked, looking concerned. He must be worried about me. As a bank employee, his sense of justice must have prompted him to ask. Grateful for his concern, I assured him, "It's for work, so it's not fraud." But Ryan wasn't convinced. "Perhaps you should reconsider. Are you sure there's no mistake?" Eventually, he even said, "I find it hard to believe that an elderly person needs such a large amount of money." He seemed utterly convinced it was a scam. Despite my explanations, he adamantly refused to process our request. However, we had our reasons too. We genuinely needed the money for legitimate purposes. Having made the extra effort to come here, we couldn't just back down. After a circular argument, Ryan sighed deeply, realizing we wouldn't give up. Then he said something unexpected. "I'm terribly sorry, but as of now, the manager has decided that we cannot serve elderly customers." To our disbelief, he was arbitrarily trying to force us out. My wife and I exchanged looks of shock. Behind us, a line of other customers had formed, including some elderly people. They all looked somewhat anxious. I asked again, "What exactly do you mean by that?" But Ryan firmly repeated, "Elderly customers cannot be served." His sense of justice now felt oppressive. Suddenly, my wife let out an ominous laugh. This wasn't good. While a puzzled Ryan looked at her, I held my head in my hands. I knew that when my wife laughed like this, she was seriously angry. Deciding Ryan was getting nowhere, she approached another employee. "Excuse me, you there, with the pink tie, could you contact the branch manager for me? Ask him to come to the president's office." My wife called over the bank employee with the pink tie. It was clear that the man with the pink tie was quite senior and held some position of authority. He surveyed the room with a stern gaze. Seeing my wife, his expression turned pale. "Understood, Mrs. Thompson," he exclaimed. "The president of the bank, that lady." His sudden voice and actions stirred a buzz among the surrounding people. The bustling bank came to a momentary halt, and all eyes turned to us. Little did they know, my wife was the president of this megabank. Today was her day off, but we had business at the bank. Unfortunately, our luck was out, as the nearby bank was closed. Thinking it would be worthwhile to make the trip, we decided to visit this branch for an impromptu inspection. Ryan's face, having grasped the situation from his superior's behavior, turned from pale to ashen. "I'm truly sorry for the disrespectful behavior. Deeply apologize," he said. In the president's office, the branch manager, Michael, apologized us deeply. "Ryan, you apologize too," Michael instructed Ryan. It seemed like a big fuss over nothing. Standing next to my wife, who had erupted in anger, I watched Michael and Ryan. They apologized us again and again. Since entering the room, it felt like I had only heard their apologies. "Why did you behave like that?" my wife asked calmly, fitting of a president. Ryan, prompted by a glance from Michael, responded, "Telephone scam is prevalent, and we were trained to be cautious, especially when elderly customers handle large sums of money." "Of course, that's very important," my wife acknowledged. Ryan's caution was valid, but it was excessive. "We're withdrawing money for a legitimate reason." "Yes, you need to assess each situation carefully. Sometimes it's crucial not to jump to conclusions and to listen to others." Ryan, silenced by her words, hung his head. In fact, Ryan was the youngest employee at this branch. Perhaps that's why he seemed so anxious. Wondering what was driving his urgency, I asked him about it. He replied, "I wanted to make a mark for myself. I thought if I consulted a senior, they might take credit for it." Credit. I thought if I could prevent a scam, I'd be praised and maybe even awarded, he said, smiling innocently. We were all taken aback by his reasoning. I couldn't believe he was so worked up for such a reason. His unexpected answer deflated the tension. You can't let your vanity or self-satisfaction cause discomfort to customers. Even if you suspect fraud, you must explain it in a way that doesn't upset them. You were too forceful, my wife explained. Yet, Ryan still seemed somewhat discontented. But this incident turned out to be a fortunate case since we, the insiders, were the victims. If other elderly customers had been treated this way, it could have led to serious damage. A lot of the elderly customers who use our banks in this area are wealthy, aren't they, Michael? My wife asked. Michael quickly nodded in agreement. If they get offended and stop their transactions, do you know the consequences? The bank could suffer losses big enough to cause a shutdown, she explained, and Ryan finally seemed to understand. Realizing his mistake, he apologized once again. My wife nodded quietly in acknowledgement. She then said, "Not just him, all the staff need re-education," and stood up to leave. Understood. I'm very sorry, Michael replied, his complexion slightly better than before. It seemed like the issue was resolved. Phew, that turned into quite a scene. Now to quickly finish our business and have dinner. That's what I was thinking. At that moment, I believed everything was settled. The four of us left the president's office together. We headed inside the bank to complete our original task. So, you're here for a withdrawal, correct? Instead of a regular bank employee, Michael personally attended to us. Ryan, learning proper conduct, observed Michael closely. Yes, please proceed with the withdrawal, I was about to say, when suddenly, bang! A loud noise echoed through the bank. Rushing to see where it came from, I saw three people wearing ski masks. One of them had raised a gun towards the ceiling. The noise could have been from that gunshot. Then one of the masked men started threatening a female bank employee, hand over the money, holding a survival knife. Startled by the sudden event, Michael collapsed. And Ryan turned pale with fear. A bank robbery. While I felt the urge to panic, I tried to stay calm. Looking again at the ceiling, where the gunshot supposedly hit. It was oddly undamaged. So, it was a bluff. I whispered to my wife, "It's okay, that's a toy gun. The barrel is blocked. There's no hole in the ceiling." She nodded slightly after looking up. "Hey, you, if you resist, we'll shoot. Follow our orders. Leave your cell phones here and gather together." The employees and customers were herded into one spot, with their cell phones being confiscated. "Who's the manager of this store?" the robber bellowed. Hearing this, Michael let out another yelp of "Veek." Such an obvious reaction not only revealed he was the manager, but also made him an easy target for the robbers. As expected, the robber approached Michael and ordered, "Stuff the money in the bag." Michael trembled in fear, shaking uncontrollably. Helpless and frightened, he reluctantly followed the instructions. "Don't you dare call the police," the robber shouted, causing Michael to drop money and stumble in his panic. He must be in a panic. His work was slow and clumsy. Sweat glistened on Michael's face. Just as one of the increasingly irritated robbers approached Michael, about to shout at him again. "Nay na nay na." The faint sound of police sirens began to echo. Although it started off as a small sound, it definitely grew louder and was approaching our location. "Hey, who did it? Who called the cops?" "Bro, that's not the issue here. They are coming." The robbers panicked upon realizing the police had been called. Damn it. Change of plan. Close all the doors and windows. Hey, you. Lower the shutter. The robber ordered Michael. With trembling hands, Michael pressed the lock button. They decided to change their plan and barricade themselves inside the bank. I quickly scanned the hostages. There were a few elderly people, some young women, and only a child about 2 years old. There are no young men with physical strength. Arrange a vehicle for escape. The robber commanded the police using a megaphone. But the police couldn't easily agree to such demands. The police, being careful not to harm the hostages, started negotiations by saying, "Release the hostages first." The negotiations were tough, with neither side giving in. "Mommy, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home." A 2-year-old child started fussing. Hungry, scared, the little girl who had been quietly enduring finally reached her limit. "Hey, shut that kid up," the leader yelled, approaching the mother and daughter. Then the man pointed the gun at the mother and daughter. While it was actually a toy, the terror it instilled in those unaware was considerable. The mother, completely terrified, held her child protectively and apologized. But the child was only 2 years old. Despite her mother's attempts to soothe her, the little girl eventually burst into tears. "Damn it!" The robber glared fiercely at the mother and daughter. "I'm sorry." As the mother spoke, an elderly woman approached the child. She spoke to the little girl in a gentle voice, making eye contact. There, it's okay." She then took a pair of gloves out of her apron pocket. The child stopped crying momentarily as she was spoken to. The elderly woman quickly turned the gloves into a puppet, capturing the child's interest. "Hello, what's your name? How old are you? You're so cute." The puppet talked as the woman moved her fingers. The girl, fascinated, stopped crying. The woman continued to speak to her gently. Soon, the girl began smiling and touching the glove puppet. The woman handed her the gloves, which she played with, pulling and inserting her fingers. Her mood greatly improved, no longer crying but quite happy. Seeing this, the woman said to the mother, "I used to be a daycare worker. I love children. She's adorable." The mother nodded in relief. Then, another elderly woman began to comfort the mother. "You're pregnant, aren't you? Are you okay?" she asked. The mother nodded slightly. I was curious how she knew. The mother's belly wasn't visibly swollen, and at first glance, she didn't look pregnant. But she was rubbing her stomach unintentionally. The woman had noticed that action and spoken up. The elderly woman surrounded the mother and child protectively. "This is no good place. It's not good for the baby to have stress," she murmured, glaring silently at the robbers in condemnation. The other customers joined in, casting cold stares at the robbers. Even the robbers seemed to feel a sting in their conscience under the silent reproach. I looked around the area. Could there be something here that could help resolve this situation? Then I noticed a cane, presumably brought by someone, lying a short distance away. It might be useful. I gently tapped a nearby elderly man. I discreetly pointed at the cane, making sure not to alert the perpetrator, towards the elderly man who turned to us and slightly tilted his head. Upon seeing that, the man turned towards us and nodded slightly. Then, he nudged another elderly man in the same manner. Having grasped the situation, he too turned towards us, grinning and nodding. At that moment, my wife Sarah suddenly stood up. "What do you want, old woman?" Startled by my wife's sudden action, the leader of the robbers yelled out. Unfazed by this, my wife stepped forward towards the robbers. "I am the president of this bank," my wife declared loudly and clearly. With a resolute stride, she handed her business card to the robber. "Isn't one hostage enough? Just me alone," my wife asserted. "Don't be ridiculous." "Shut up," the robber retorted loudly, refusing to give in. But my wife continued undeterred. "Please release the others. There is a small child and a pregnant woman here. Some people are in poor health. If we get hurt or worse, it will only add to your crimes," she reasoned. The robbers were at a loss for words, confronted with my wife's valid argument. "Boss, what do we do now?" The henchmen looked to their leader for guidance, who seemed quite shaken. He appeared to be pondering the best course of action. "Maybe we can keep this old woman as a hostage, but what if the cops come in while we're letting others go? It'll make our crimes worse." The robbers voiced their individual concerns. Amidst their chaos, the hostages remained silent, observing. But it was the leader who broke the disorder. "Quiet," he barked at his underlings. His forcefulness brought an eerie silence to the room. "Listen, if we don't get caught, it doesn't matter what crimes we commit." His irrational argument somehow unified the robbers' scattered thoughts. "Now's my chance." The robbers, preoccupied with themselves, weren't paying attention to us. Seizing the moment, I, along with another elderly man wielding a cane, moved behind the robbers. "What the?" Surprised by our sudden movement, I didn't hesitate to twist the leader's arm. "Ouch, stop it." I applied more pressure, pinning him down with my full weight. Now, he couldn't move. While the other robbers were stunned, the elderly man with the cane knocked their weapons away. Another elderly man kicked one of the robbers. The fragility of a group crime became apparent once their coordination faltered. Suddenly, the roles of hostages and criminals reversed. We successfully subdued the robbers. Almost simultaneously, police officers burst into the bank. "Over here. The criminals are here." Apparently, someone had secretly contacted the police during our scuffle. An elderly woman, formerly a hostage, guided the police to us. As the police arrived, I released the robber and handed them over to the officers. Relieved that all the robbers was arrested without our injuries, I let out a sigh. That's when I locked eyes with the commanding officer. He quickly approached me. "James, well done. We appreciate your help." He thanked me. Recognizing his familiar face, I couldn't help but smile. No wonder, he was Ethan, my direct subordinate. Or more accurately, former subordinate. Before retiring, I was a dedicated detective, and Ethan was one of my most trusted colleagues, always there to support me. As I was briefly explaining the incident, the bank employee Ryan hurried over. He said, "James, you're incredible. I deeply regret my behavior and have been reflecting on it." His rapid speech and bright eyes conveyed his admiration. No, it was because everyone bravely stood up to them," I responded. "Yes, that's true. Everyone was amazing. I couldn't do anything," Ryan said, seemingly downcast. Seeing this, Ethan chuckled a bit. "The people in this area are also spirited, especially the elderly. It's reassuring for us and the police," he remarked. "Indeed, the locals here are very energetic." The two men who helped me subdue the robbers were masters of martial arts. Since retiring, I often saw them volunteering at crime prevention workshops and neighborhood patrols. Even in my view, they were as physically fit as young people. And my wife Sarah, she's skilled in self-defense. She was confident she could handle the situation even if the robber attacked. To me, as her husband, this confidence is a bit worrying, but she is a president, a woman with many responsibilities. She's undoubtedly strong in both body and mind. "Oh, right," Ethan suddenly said. "Michael, he's quite capable too. He quickly contacted the police and then pretended to be scared to buy time. Thanks to him, we could arrive before any casualties occurred," he explained. Indeed, Michael, who kept yelping in fear with Ezek, was actually a strategist all along. I was impressed. The bank staff must be well trained to act so promptly in such situations. It's commendable for a corporation," Ethan remarked, smiling gently. Hearing the bank being praised felt like a compliment to Sarah, the president. Ryan thought of the elderly in this town, reminding him of his grandparents. Both are quite old and frail. That's why he had a strong feeling that he needs to protect the elderly. It was the same with telephone scam. He wanted to prevent it at all costs. However, today's events were an eye-opener. These people were all full of life, and Ryan, who had been paralyzed with fear, ended up being the one protected. The reality of the situation and his own inability to do anything. He felt a sort of shock at these revelations. Seeing his demeanor, I spoke to him. "We all want to stay healthy, but we never know what might happen to us," I said. Ryan started to respond, "That's not true. Sadly, that's the reality. Tomorrow, we may be bedridden. That's why we should think and act as much as we can while we can," I advised. "That's true," Ryan replied. "Your desire to protect is admirable and appreciated, but don't view the elderly through a lens of age. Of course, there are those who genuinely need help, so it's best to offer assistance after understanding each person's situation," I suggested. Hearing this, Ryan realized that not all elderly are the same. It might have been a mistake to think of them as weak and in need of protection. Just like some elderly are energetic, there are young people who may be pregnant or have small children. Many have invisible ailments. I feel like Ryan had overlooked that fact. Ryan felt like scales had fallen from his eyes. "Be kind and gentle to everyone, not just the elderly," Ryan murmured. Saying it aloud, it felt like a new motto had taken root in him. A sense of purpose and motivation began to rise within him. Ryan regained his original sparkle in his eyes. And so, the criminals were arrested and transported by the police. Finally, a sigh of relief. Today was truly eventful. As I heaved a sigh of relief, remembering the day's turmoil, I recalled our original purpose for visiting the bank. We hadn't yet withdrawn the money. Recently, my eldest daughter built a new house, and my eldest son's wife gave birth. There's also a grandchild's school entrance celebration. One expense after another, that's why we came here. Celebrations like these really require cash, my wife commented, looking troubled. Then Michael appeared, smoothing out his suit. With a gentle smile, he said, "Sorry for the delay. How can I assist you now?" After completing the celebrations for our children and grandchildren, our lives returned to peaceful normalcy. Spring is here. It's been quite warm lately, perfect for planting vegetable seedlings. Tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, ideal for summer vegetables. However, I remember last year's mistake. Last year, I miscalculated the amount to plant. As a result, I ended up harvesting a large quantity of cucumbers, even adding them to chicken soup. This year, I must be careful not to repeat that. But if there's an excess again, selling them as $1 vegetables might be an option. That sounds fun in its own way. Given that I'm controlling the planting amount, there might be some extra space in the garden. If there is, I'd like to plant sunflower seeds, my wife's favorite. I'm sure she'll be delighted. So, I start planning for the days ahead. As I do, the prospect of summer becomes increasingly exciting. Ping, ping. My phone chirped cheerfully on the desk. It was a notification for likes on a recent post. Lately, I've been into posting updates about my garden on social media. The likes came from my elderly neighbors. Like me, they're also curious and enjoy trying new things. We relish our days, filled with new discoveries in our later years. I want to stay that way too. I want to stay active and vibrant, even as I age. I aim to continue being helpful within my capabilities. I'm still in my prime, with plenty of dreams, hopes, and things to enjoy. Intending to walk a wonderful second life, hand in hand with my family and community. And with that thought, I resolve to live each day with enthusiasm,